And it's just not the most welcoming environment for me. I've been to Tennessee, I've been all over, but people say Atlanta's not the South. But give me a moment, 1 second. I just gotta adjust something here. Okay, we're back. I've been all over the South, and it's just not my get with the climate. And Neil deGrasse Tyson has a political climate of the South, and is very religious. But so, I've always lived my favorite region of this occupied territory. That I still say the true people who are Native Americans. But that's me. Um, I still do not recognize the U.S.'s legal hold on the territory we call the United States of America. I do not recognize it. I do not accept it. I do not deem it legitimate. But I do recognize their capacity to kill me, incarcerate me, if I do not go along with many aspects of their illegal, illegitimate hold on this land. I'm not proud to be an American, where at least I'm told I'm free. But I understand the circumstances from which I was born into. I understand them that are most viable and effective to subvert the paradigm, the conditions that I was born into. I hope that clears some things up. But moving on. I've always preferred to live in the Northeast region. And it's not just the geographics. I just think it's a more intellectually stimulating region of the country. But that's me. Some of y'all love the South. I mean, there's some black people. I think a lot of black people that love the South are just pretending. But I've never understood any of that. This territorial imperative. But that's not nothing to do with nothing else. All I'm saying is I'm happy we're getting close to spring. I used to have to get up at 5 in the morning and it would be pitch black. And now I get up and the sun is emerging. I wake up with the sun at 5, and as I travel to the Q4 studio here in the city of Chirac, state of Illinois, America, I come in with sunlight. I see my plants, my indoor plants are starting to thrive, to reawaken. We've got more hours of more intense sunlight. It'll be time, which I think this Sunday I'm going to have to call a meeting for the ecologic volunteers. Everyone, if you want to work in our HF garden site, if you want to get some time in the sun, cultivate some organic fruits and vegetables, non-GMO. If you want to do some composting and tilling of the soil, some landscaping, create a beautiful community spot, to produce food for yourself, your family, and the community. Pay attention to go join the Ecologic Outreach page on Facebook, and you will find opportunities. So you can come out and work the garden. So that's coming up. And I think we're going to have to start that at least in the spring. The growth season here is not as long as it be when I used to grow food in Missouri and in Kansas. Man, it's almost like the tropics compared to Chicago. So be on the lookout for that. I'm going to set up a meeting to try to, orientation to talk to people about our goals and objective for the garden and our larger ecologic sustainability and green agenda in Chicago and beyond. So pay attention and look out for that. Okay? So check that box. Did I say Q4 Radio, AM 1680? You could also find us on the iTunes app, iTunes Radio and TuneIn app. And let me give you a warning. Bro Diallo is operating off of maybe 2.5 hours sleep. So if you hear some things, I'm going to say some things I don't have to say. And I'm going to say them again because I'm sleep deprived. And if you know anybody that know me from back in the day and around the way, they know I never used to sleep. And I'm becoming accustomed to sleeping on a regular basis. And I used to have people that were concerned for me that would come to me and be like, yo, We're really concerned for your health. You don't sleep. So now I'm starting to feel it. I don't know if it's age, environment, or just the ancestors, but I'm starting to feel it when I lack sleep. So sleep deprived, bro Diallo. I might say some things. I stand by everything I've ever said on the show, except for the things that I have directly had to make corrections. I have made, coming off the dome on Bro Diallo's show, going off script. Sometimes I might say some things that, like one time, had meant to say years ago. I'll never forget one of my biggest mistakes on live on the air. And I was talking about the civil rights era, the civil rights reform, civil rights struggle. And I was talking about Rosa Parks. And what I was talking about, and I said, Sister Rosa Parks, this, and I referred to Rosa Parks as Harriet Tubman. I don't know where that came from. I said something to the effect, Harriet Tubman didn't, sitting on the front of the bus. And was actually seated in the colored section. She didn't sit on the front of the bus. Or something, but that's one of the biggest mistakes. I don't know why I would mistake Harriet Tubman or mix those two names up. But when I do things like that, I don't stand by it. When I'm wrong, I'll admit it. And if y'all catch me, which y'all do, man, y'all some player haters out there listening. I think some people listen to the Bro Diallo just for me to make a flub or a mistake or a misquote and jump down on me. Some of y'all that's the only reason y'all listen. And I appreciate y'all. But other than that, if it's not a formal retraction, I stand by everything I say. Even if I say things that I'm sleep deprived, like I'm not proud to be an American, I am not a patriot, and you won't catch me at no truck pulling rally chanting USA. But I digress. There's something I was thinking about that I might bring up later. Michael Jackson. Let me say what I have to say about Michael Jackson, because there's a lot. I had this young feminist, bless her heart, this young feminist, because I had said that. See, there's a lot of overlapping and intertangled issues here. But I had said that God impregnated the Virgin Mary when she was 14. And then I put the hashtag mute God, because God has engaged in predatory behaviors towards underage girls. If you believe the Bible, the Quran, and or the Torah, or the Book of Mormon, or any of the other Christian cults or Christian sects. And most people understood my point. But it's also funny because people started debating. Some people got on there and said, no, Virgin Mary was 12. And then some people jumped on it and it's like, no, she was 16. Some people say, yes, she was 14. But you have to understand, in that era, in the biblical era, in the BC era, you were considered a woman, and the rights of women occurred, and the role of women was that you started at 13 because the life expectancy was probably 30. So 13-year-olds were considered middle-aged. So there was all this debate. And it kind of frustrates me when people want to legitimately debate the details and the accurate interpretation of the Bible. Like one time I said, all of y'all people trying to live a life to get to heaven. And heaven, if you read the Bible, is a nightmarish place. It's a horrible, horrible place. It's a place that's so bad, I said one time, that Lucifer, the most beautiful angel, the most sexy angel of all the angels, first of all, there are no women in heaven. And all these naked men with wings. I don't understand why such a God would call homosexuality an abomination when it seems like he created a homosexual paradise in the clouds. But I digress. God said, I said that God, that heaven, if heaven was such a beautiful place, why was Lucifer able to convince 50% of the heavenly host to rebel against God and the war in heaven and Lucifer's rebellion that caused him to be mutilated by God and cast down to hell, or cast down to earth, or cast out of heaven? And I said that there's been all the tyrannical rulers, monarchs, dictators, with all the oppressive governments, throughout history, there has never been an uprising or a revolution that included 50% of the citizens, or 50% of the slaves, or 50% of the peasants, or 50% of the proletariat. There has never been a lower caste or lower class or racial group, oppressed group, where when it was time to rebel, you were able to get 50% of the people to rise up. Eventually, everybody comes along. It's kind of like the Star Wars movie. You watch 3 episodes of the Star Wars movie, Return of the Jedi, Empire Strikes Back, and what's the first one? A New Hope. And you see like 4 or 5 people and a giant monkey man and 2 robots fighting the whole empire. But the moment that the empire was defeated, everybody came out like, yeah, down with the empire. Just like your old crusty cousins and uncles and aunties. All of them was Black Panthers in the 60s. All of them. They swear to you. If they wasn't toting guns in Oakland with Huey P. If they wasn't, marching through Harlem with Malcolm, they was on the knees on a bridge somewhere with Dr. King. They swear everybody was down back then. But if you go actually read the documents, if you review the history, most black people was going along to get along. So I said, how tyrannical, how much of a horrible ruler must God be to provoke a rebellion that included 50% of his subjects, when there's never been a revolution that had that many people uprise at once. At the onset of the revolution, never in history, recorded history anyway. And people got on there, and instead of really going to my core point, they got on there and debated with me about the number of angels, or the percentages of angels that actually joined the rebellion. And so people was like, oh, it wasn't 50%, it was 25%. My story still holds up. I don't know of any revolution in its onset that included 25% of the oppressed class. And I just know, and I understand, I respect people that are able to get 3 to 5, 1% of the oppressed people to join the revolution in its onset. Me trying to provoke, trying to spark, trying to cultivate a revolution. Most of my damn life in the United States. I know it ain't easy. It ain't pretty. It's exhausting and thankless work. So people want to debate the details of a myth instead of, like, the Bible is allegory. The Bible is fables. These are fictional stories meant to portray lessons about real world circumstances. But anyway, so it kind of frustrates me when people want to have, academic debates about that nonsense. I'd rather debate whether the Incredible Hulk can defeat Superman in a one-on-one fight. I think that is a more valuable and more fruitful debate than the exact percentages of angels that rebelled against God, or the exact age of Mary when she was supposedly immaculately conceived, the man, God in the flesh, savior of humanity. My larger point was, and my point to saying that was, our most holy, sacred text promote the sexual exploitation of underage girls. And so when I said mute God, this feminist got on there and was like, how dare you use a real world serious case as R. Kelly's ongoing crimes against black girls and to try to make light of it. And she even admitted, I don't really understand the point you're trying to say here with this mute God. I don't understand the point you're trying to make. So she admitted she didn't know what the hell I was talking about. She just knew it wasn't a good thing because in her mind, this R. Kelly issue is much too serious, much too tragic in order to make light of or to mock by using the Bible or superimposing R. Kelly's situation on the Bible or superimposing the Bible or the myth of the Immaculate Conception onto the R. Kelly case. So then I tried to explain to the young lady, this young feminist, number one, I said your analysis should always be both historical and institutional. Always. And I tried to explain to her that R. Kelly, what's the first thing he does when he got in trouble? Way back in the day, back in the early 2000s, when the tape was released of him urinating on a child, he came out with a gospel song. Not a gospel song. He came up with a gospel anthem that has been played in religious ceremonies across the world. I Believe I Can Fly. There's girls on the YouTubes doing praise dancing to I Believe I Can Fly. He said, people, you saved me. That song, You Saved Me. And I've never listened to You Saved Me in its entirety. But I've never been an R. Kelly fan. But his music is inescapable. If you black and you have a tendency and you're too poor to get away from black people like Michael Jackson to escape your blackness. I was born black and I haven't made enough money to live any other way than as a black among blacks. I haven't made enough money to get away from him. If you are in that cultural milieu, his music is inescapable. It's omnipresent. I'm not even a fan. Go back and listen to the Bro Diallo archives and count how many times y'all done found me playing any kind of R&B. It's just not my genre. I didn't even do it out of righteousness. I'm not an R&B dude. But, like I said, I know for a fact, being a passive observer, is that R. Kelly went into God, like Mace did. Quoting Common. I have some things to say about Common's hypocrisy. Common is truly Common. I mean, that was the most, Common, the rapper, needs to change his name to Basic, because you're basic. But I'll get back to him. R. Kelly. He went into God. And he created, at least from my estimation, at least half a dozen songs that, even if they were secular songs, they've been embraced and adopted. And these religious ceremonies, like the wedding, which is a religious ceremony, a holy matrimony, and I remember when, and let me not talk about my brother's business, but I went to my brother's wedding. And he wanted to get married in this old rural church, this little wooden steeple. He wanted this, most romantic wedding. Kind of annoyed me because I was with my wife, but we hadn't gotten formally married. We was just kicking it. So my brother got married. He had this big elaborate wedding. I'm like, man, shoot, now you trying to set this high bar for romantic weddings, man. Keep that bar low. Try to make all the other men in the family look bad with this fancy wedding. But anyway, he drove out here and way out in the middle of nowhere, far out. And we all in tuxedos, we all riding around in limos and shiny cars. And we get in there and we're supposed to get, the ceremony. And then there was this delay. And I'm like, what's going on? It's like my brother had left because he went to a bachelor party and all that. He left the paperwork for the wedding at his house. And the preacher, the man of God, the man of the cloth, in this holy matrimony, said, I can't marry you if you ain't got this government paperwork. So me, I suspect the only professed atheist in the building, was like, who's officiating this marriage? Who's sanctioning this marriage? The government of Ohio, the state of Ohio, or God? Whose word are you working off of? And that preacher looked at me and was like, boy, you know what? You already know what this is. Tax exemption, baby. Trying to keep that status. But I question, I went to the minister like, how dare you say that you won't unite this man and woman in holy matrimony before God and the congregation because he doesn't have a piece of government paperwork. That tells me something right then and there. But he's looking at me like, man, please. You know how long I've been running this hustle? But anyway. But then, God, whatever. I digress. R. Kelly was embraced by the church. His music and him as a person. And now that thanks to Dream Hampton. Shout out Dream Hampton. Did I call her Green Hampton? Shout out to Dream Hampton. I told you, Dream Hampton, I really appreciate what she did. Now I want her to make a documentary about them two crackheads that stole my bikes. They've never been apprehended. If she can make surviving two crackhead bike thieves, so we can bring, because if she make a doc on you, I heard she's working on some more documentaries. I heard after the success of surviving R. Kelly, a lot of production companies, they cutting checks. So Dream Hampton, shoot, she's our Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That white women have the other notorious RBG, racist Ruth Bader Ginsburg in the Supreme Court. She's our Chief Justice. But I digress. Continue to digress. I'm sorry. Anyway, now, R. Kelly publicist was asked, now that R. Kelly's been bailed out a second time by a Christian, R. Kelly was bailed out by a Christian woman, went back to jail, and then anonymous woman, who I suspect is another Christian woman, bailed him out again. And so his publicist was asked, what's R. Kelly doing? They said R. Kelly is writing, composing, and singing gospel music. He's in meditation and prayer, and he's eating McDonald's. So every time R. Kelly gets exposed, he goes back into God, and God embraces him. If you know the Christian doctrine, there is no sin too great. Jesus already died for R. Kelly's sins. So there is no sin too great that God cannot absolve you of if you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. That's it. It's a wonderful hustle. You don't have to take any personal responsibility for any damn thing, because when you do wrong, the devil made you do it, and God's going to forgive you. You're just a middleman. You're just a born in sin. But this young feminist is telling me I should not tie religion and God to R. Kelly. When I would say, quite the contrary, religion and God is the reason we have R. Kellys. And let me tell you why. Unfortunately, in my life, I've had some direct experience with sexual predators. And I tell you, I consider pimps to be sexual predators. I don't know of any gang that didn't engage in sexual predation. I remember the gangs in my neighborhood that evolved into gangs. They started off as little crews and little neighborhood dudes, and they evolved into gangs. And every gang had like a female subordinate gang of women. And in order for the girls, I said this before, and I think this is pretty commonplace, not just in the United States, but pretty much globally for organized gangs. For the women to be initiated into the female subordinate gang, she has to be gang raped by the gang. They would jump in dudes. Like if I want to join the gang, I get in a circle of a half dozen dudes, and we wail on each other, and they jump you in. For the girls to get in the gang, she gets in the circle of a half a dozen or more dudes, and they all have sex with her. And this is a routine. I mean, rape culture is embedded in the gang and street culture. And I knew a lot of dudes who participated in this. Not really personal, but I knew them. Neighbors. And when I say neighbors, I'm not like y'all. Most of y'all had two neighbors. One somebody on the left, somebody on the right. And depending on the layout of your neighborhood, somebody might be in the front or back. When you lived in a project, you could have 300 neighbors. You would have 300 people living within 100 square feet of you. Or more. In every unit. And they stack these units up. So I had neighbors. And so but even more so. One thing I would always hear, and I worked at Rikers Island. And one of the kids I grew up with that was part of my inner circle. And I'm not even going to protect dude. I don't associate with, I haven't spoken to him in decades. It's been a long time. But I had a friend named Troy. He was a sexual predator. Now, we didn't have the language for that back then. We always knew he was off. We always knew he was off. And there was always rumors and whispers about him. But as we got older, as we went through junior high school and as we got into high school, we were like, yo, this dude. But anyway, ultimately, what I find from working in a prison, and they had a special housing unit for the people accused, not yet convicted. All the men that I saw in this unit were accused, because once they're convicted, they go upstate. But in Rikers Island, they had a special protected unit for high-profile cases and men accused of sex crimes that they were kept away from children. But one thing, as I did working in the infirmary, interacting with sexual predators, watching documentaries, reading books about them, even if you go watch episodes of To Catch a Predator, you don't even have to do any intense research. You go look at To Catch a Predator. And one theme that you find consistent amongst sexual predators, and mainly men who prey upon girls. This might be different for men who prey upon little boys or women who prey upon children, but one thing I find almost universal amongst male predators who particularly target underage girls. One thing I always hear them say, they will confess. They write it down. They write songs and poetry about it. My wife was I heard my wife cussing. She was making dinner and she started cussing. And she comes up to me. I'm upstairs. She comes up, listen to this. Can you believe this? Because she was having with her 90s revival. She was having a 90s R&B party, a one-woman 90s R&B party while she was making dinner. So she had queued up these random 90s songs. And I wanted to get as far away from that as I want. But then a particular song came on. And she came running upstairs. She was so outraged. And of course, when misery loves company. So I had to hear this song. And she was like, I'm downstairs listening to 90s R&B. And this song comes up in the queue. I haven't heard this song since I was a young girl. And it's a song called Don't Be Afraid by Aaron Hall. I believe Aaron Hall. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. She's like, listen to this. And it is literally a song about a man seducing and raping a young girl. And my point I'm getting to, in all these scenarios, men who target young girls, the core of their motivations is purity. And I say you can do formal research, formal psychological evaluations, or you could just go watch the tabloid media. You could go watch To Catch a Predator. And when they talk to the men, and the ones who are being honest, they were like, the reason I target young girls is because they're pure. They're untouched. I'm the only man that ever possessed her. It's that Virgin Mary concept. Any woman that has been touched by another man is unclean, impure. Any woman that has been out into the world, that has any level of sophistication, any level of education, any capacity to challenge a man intellectually or even physically, is unworthy, is unclean, is somehow tainted. This whole concept of purity of women is a biblical concept. Why did God have to impregnate a virgin? Why not God have any woman could, in the story of immaculate conception, any woman could immaculately conceive, any woman of reproductive age. He could have got a 30-year-old mother of 2 or 4. He could have got a woman of any age. He could have got any woman that was already experienced. This whole concept of purity, this whole concept of women being a corrupting influence, that the world was a paradise until a woman consulted with Satan and then went to a man and corrupted a man. And you will find this rhetoric, even people who claim they're not Christian, even people who are not Muslim, even people who are not Jewish, even people who claim to be secular, if they are brought up in this culture, in this concept of an unclean woman, of a lowly woman, of a Jezebel, of a harlot, is one form of woman, but then there's another form of woman who is pure, who is clean, who is godly, who is worthy, who can't be possessed by a man. So I don't understand how you're mad at R. Kelly and you do not have any institutional analysis of the mentality, of the cultural, of the indoctrination and cultural conditions that lead not just to create an R. Kelly, but to create all the people around R. Kelly who facilitate or who are able to make excuses for R. Kelly. And you want to keep focusing on individuals exclusively. And she wants to talk to me about black girls are not protected. And there aren't enough jail cells. There aren't enough prosecutors. There aren't enough Dream Hamptons and enough cameramen and editors to make documentaries to incarcerate, to chase down every single child predator. You have to change the culture. You have to transform the culture, the mentality, the ideas that govern us, our very self-concept, our very relationship between man and woman, the value system, the social hierarchy. You have to be revolutionary. So if you're like, I want to mute R. Kelly, but you don't shut down the R. Kelly factory that produces R. Kellys every day, there are little children, little boys who are not yet born, who will be born into a world, and they will get these notions of the Virgin Mary, the purity of sex, the Jezebel, the unclean woman, the ideas that you can possess a woman, that you can control, that the woman was made from your rib, is a helpmeet, is only here to facilitate your enrichment, your pleasure, where objectification. But you want to get mad at me because I'm tying God to R. Kelly? But for a lot of these feminists and other activists, a lot of these integrationist, reactionary activists, suffering is their currency. They don't want to end the systems and institutions that lead to oppression and exploitation, because if there is no oppression or exploitation, they don't get to come in and be the reactionary heroes, the reactionary advocates. So I try to encourage, because I think the young lady's heart is in the right place. So I'm like, you should have a historical and institutional analysis. Yes, convict R. Kelly, mute R. Kelly, harass R. Kelly, get R. Kelly, protect young girls. But you have to look back and say, this is not isolated to R. Kelly. This is an epidemic. This is not an individual failing as much as a systemic issue, a cultural issue. And a lot of these women who are social justice warriors are also in full support of the church and institutions that give the fundamental mind state. Because there is not one characteristic of these predators is that they have this warped sense of what pure sex, who tie in purity and sex, and that's a biblical concept, holy sex, godly sex. And the concept of man possessing a woman being the possession of a man. And it is easier to possess, control a child than it is, and again, the fact that children are our possessions and should be under our control. All biblical. So the fundamental ideologies that feed these behaviors, and every thought, there must be intellectual, mental activity to precede any thought. And I don't care if it's, a reaction thought, where you put your hand on the hot stove, you still need your neurons, your receptors, your central nervous system still to, whether you pull your hand away from a hot stove, that requires mental capacity. And there are people who don't have the mental capacity when they touch a hot stove to move their hand away. If your brain isn't functioning right, people with Alzheimer's injure themselves and they pay no attention to it. They're pain receptors. But then you have higher brain functions where you're carrying out a systematic behavior, predatory behavior, planning out these crimes and these atrocities. There has to be some ideas. So unless you believe in somebody just born evil, and yes, you have psychopaths, you have predators, some born predators, but any type of research will tell you that these people are a relatively small percentage of the population. Most people that engage in antisocial, anti-human behaviors is because ideas and conditions that cultivate that in them. Because if you believe people are just born bad, then you can't, and a lot of those same progressives and feminists that are like, oh, they're just born bad. I don't have to change the church. You can't change the schools. You can't change the entertainment. And you can't make any type of reforms on a social cultural level. You can't transform the fundamental ideas because they're just bad that way. If that's the case, then you should believe in lifelong incarceration and you reject rehabilitation. Some people are beyond saving, but I think the vast majority of people can be cultivated to be humane, or if they have gone astray, can be. But that's a whole nother issue. The issue is, and it just frustrates me, all these righteous, upstanding people who have all the right social justice vocabulary and take all the right sides of all positions, really shun institutional analysis. And a lot of these feminists, I think I have a call. I don't know. If that was a caller, you can call back. If I didn't pick up your call. Sorry. Maybe that's that young feminist. But yeah, I always get this. Feminists just think men are bad. Okay, men are bad. Even if you're a man or bad feminist. Yeah, I know some badman people. A lot of bad men out there. But these bad men, they are not the originators of the ideas that govern their lives. And they are not the controllers of the institutions that sustain or allow for, perpetuate, or validate their behaviors. But the problem is, a lot of these feminists, they want to be ministers. They want to take over the churches. They love the hierarchical systems. Because a big part of feminism, I want to be a female CEO. I want to be a female general. I want to be a female pope. So, they don't want to have a program to dismantle these institutions because they have an agenda that says we're going to take over these institutions. So I don't know if I'm going to keep going back and forth with this young sister. But she's mad at me because I would say, yes, we should mute R. Kelly. But like I said, if you talk to R. Kelly, R. Kelly has a lot of ideas, concepts, beliefs that help to govern and direct his behavior and justify his behavior. And for every R. Kelly that they incarcerate, there are literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of R. Kelly predatory men that are being trained up with these ideas, ways to justify in their head. But anyway, but feminists being mad at me ain't nothing new to me. I don't like feminists being mad at me. I wish I could be a feminist. If feminism was truly about women's liberation as opposed to women's elevation within a system of oppression, I would be a feminist. I think feminism is a very legitimate movement in terms of for white women. Because that's their culture. But anyway, let me get off of this. It's a little frustrating. This little tip I'm having, a little back and forth I'm having. But moving on. Another thing, I just, liberals annoy the crap out of me. Now everybody's so righteous about the New Zealand mosque shooting. And I'm just seeing everywhere, all over the United States. The Chicago Tribune has all this wonderful writings about it. All these politicians are making all these wonderful statements in solidarity and sympathy. The war on terror, the illegitimate war on terror, has killed over 1 million Arabs. When the UN and Amnesty International and these other bodies went around saying, let's do a death toll, because you remember, back in 2000, I think it was 2014, 2013, Colin Powell said, we don't do body counts. We're at war. We don't do body counts. We don't waste time with body counts. This is war. So the Bush administration, they were doing the body counts. That was a lie. You know, I think the Pentagon is one of the most immaculate record-keeping government agencies in the world. They keep some of the most precise records. Some of the most accurate scientific analysis comes out of the Pentagon. But Colin Powell, when people are like, what's the death toll? Because every day we've lost 5 American lives in Iraq in the war on terror, the war for freedom. I don't know what the blood clot an American life is. What the hell is an American life? How do you sustain an American life? If I understand, an American life ain't no different than any other. There's no such thing as an American life. Life has been on this planet for billions of years. America ain't even 300 years old. Ain't no such, but anyway, they finally started releasing numbers. Independent bodies and NGOs started releasing reports about the number, the death toll, and the so-called war on terror. And it was in the millions. And then they started budgeting and said the money spent was in the trillion-dollar war. So how have we been sitting in this country? Some of y'all go back to September 11, 2001. But that was not when the war on terror started. The war on terror started in 1993. That was Clinton 2, 3. 1990. 1991. When the Kuwaiti regime was slam drilling Iraqi oil. And Saddam Hussein said the Kuwaitis, and Kuwait used to be a part of Iraq until the British colonizers cut it off. So anyway, Saddam said this little kingdom of Kuwait is stealing our oil. And he tried to go through legal means. This is an illegal act. You can't do this across border. You can't slam drill across borders. And he tried to go through the legal means. And since Saddam Hussein was put in power by the CIA, because Iraq had a democratic, socialist, communist government, the Ba'ath Party was set up and funded by the CIA. And when Saddam carried out a coup d'etat over the democratic socialist government of Iraq, when he took it over, the CIA gave him weapons. Not nuclear, but chemical, biological weapons and all the guns and ammos he could have. Then they gave him a list of known progressives, socialists. They gave Saddam a kill list. So Saddam could go all over Iraq and kill all freedom fighters, all anti-colonialists, all socialists. Saddam Hussein was their boy. So of course he thought he was talking to friends, but when he went over there and said, listen, I'm going to go in Kuwait and get my stuff. Get our stuff back. Stop them from violating international law. And George Bush, the first, George Herbert Walker Bush, H.W. Bush, said, do you, player? And it was all a setup. And that doesn't even go back to really, since the Crusades. White people have been on an orgy of mass murder in the so-called Middle East or the so-called Islamic world. But let's just deal with the modern. I mean, we can't go over the history of orgy of mass murder coming of Europeans against anybody else they come into contact with. But there has been an ongoing, let's just go back to since 1991 to 2019, there has been an orgy of mass slaughter throughout North Africa and the Middle East. Whereas millions of Arab, of Persian, of Islamic civilians, millions of civilians have been needlessly murdered. I'm telling you right now, in North Africa, all these boogeyman, Gaddafi, in Egypt, Tunisia, in the Middle East, Syria, there has been no agenda in the Middle East or the so-called Islamic world. There has been absolutely no agenda to overthrow America, to attack America, or even Western Europe. They're not jealous of our freedoms. They don't care to bring Sharia law here. And if you go back to the decolonization, even though they claim they never colonized the Middle East were classified as protectorate, and the Africa and Asia had colonies, but you know, it's all the same situation, taking over people's sovereign territory to extract wealth and suppress the natives. Same relationship. They've been fighting to establish sovereign rule and control of their resources, control of the means of production. There has been no agenda. But you know, the psychopaths love to engage in projection. The people who do have an agenda to invade other people's countries and take over the world say that the people they are invading and taking over have an agenda to invade them and take them over. Just like, you know, in a personal abusive relationship, R. Kelly tell these girls, is running around telling his victims that they're hurting him, that they're doing him wrong. That's how it works on a massive scale or on a person-to-person scale, the same psychopathic relationships. But the United States, long story short, the United States has been on an orgy of mass slaughter of Muslims for over 30 years, killing, official count, millions. And still, the ones they don't bomb, they gas. The one they don't gas, they put behind embargoes and sanctions and starve them to death. They allow them to die of unnecessary diseases. Madeleine Albright, another feminist, a feminist who said women who don't support other women, there's a special place in hell for women who don't support other women. A hardcore feminist was asked, in your capacity as the first woman who is Secretary of State, 1 million Iraqi children died because the Bill Clinton sanctions against the Iraqi people. Even it didn't just mean to prevent Iraq from selling its oil, to prevent Iraq from importing weapons. They also prevented Iraq from importing medical equipment. They prevented them from buying spare parts to repair x-ray machines. They prevented them from importing insulin and vaccines and other medicines. And he said as a result of U.S. sanction, over 1 million Iraqi kids were murdered. Do you think this was worth it? And she looked into the camera and said, yeah, it was worth it. Dead set niggas. Since when has that been a problem? She didn't say that last part, but I mean, that was her energy. And you have people who love Barack Obama, who love the Clintons, who love America, sitting here want to be mad and sitting here talking about, oh, we're so sorry, New Zealand. Oh, I mean, that just tears me. Sometimes I gotta tune out. Sometimes I wish I smoked weed or something. I know I never smoke weed. I can't smoke weed because then, you know, I would probably just, you know, it wouldn't be enough weed left over for the rest of y'all. Now I need to try something else. Get me a gong and some sage. Realign. Because I get really frustrated at the utter, sheer, disgusting hypocrisy of all these good people. And I'm not even talking about the racists. I'm not even talking about the white nationalists. I'm talking about the liberals. I'm talking about the progressives. I'm talking about conscious people, culturally aware. I'm talking about the humanitarians. Y'all are full of crap. Remember Common, Mr. Reach Out a Hand, Common, who went from, you know, that bony homie from Stony. He puts out this post, he put on his Instagram or whatever social media account he put it on, all the pictures of the Muslim victims and talking about these are mothers and children. Oh, and Common's wailing and moaning and gnashing his teeth and it's holding strong public solidarity with the Muslim people in New Zealand. And at the same time, this dude is starring in a movie, headlining in a movie called Hunter Killer. Hunter Killer is a commercial for the Pentagon, promoting U.S. militarism, promoting the U.S. military as not the imperial army, the mass slaughter army, the army that is not only killing people, destroying ecosystem, but is economically gutting the United States and showing them as the saviors of the world. The military is on a mission to prevent World War III. Since when do militaries prevent wars? And Common, with his knucklehead, is standing there next to these white men in a U.S. military uniform. And every single movies, I shared some of the headlines of the articles on social media where they talk about every war movie. If you have a movie and you want to use military planes, some of the militaries like the Avengers movies. Remember the Avengers Civil War, and they had that big fight. A lot of the movies, they use military sites. They want to go on a military aircraft carrier. They want to use tanks in their movies. They want to use military scenes or backdrops of military bases. And it's in the contract that if you have any type of military materials, or you want to utilize or use any public or government infrastructure for your movie, you have to accept Pentagon advisors. And what Pentagon advisors are there to do is to censor out anything that will reflect negatively on the military, and to inject anything that can be used to promote or support the military. It's propaganda. Now, when the North Koreans put out movies and have military parades, we call it propaganda. When the Soviet Union was still around and they had the parades with the missiles and the soldiers, we knew it was propaganda. So, Common is literally cashing Pentagon checks and doing elaborate movies, these big Hollywood multi-million-dollar productions, in order to get more people to embrace the military agenda or even to directly enlist into the U.S. military. And the number one killer of Muslims around the world, the U.S. military. So how are you starring in Pentagon propaganda, but you telling me you don't like seeing dead Muslims or dead anybody else? And this is what liberalism is. That's the kind of stuff that disgusts me. And all these other people don't say nothing about your sympathy, the pain, how tragic what happened in New Zealand was. If you're an Obama supporter, he's a mass murderer of Muslims. The guy who went on that shooting spree, for every Muslim he killed, Obama ordered the killing of 100 to 10,000 more Muslims than this guy did. So don't tell me you're an Obama supporter. Don't tell me you support our troops. Because just like this guy did when he shot it up mosque, U.S. soldiers are doing this on a daily basis and have been doing this kind of stuff on a daily basis for the last 30 years. So do you support our troops? Do you support the U.S. military? And if that's the case, fine. Just don't be a hypocrite. Be a fascist. Be an imperialist. Be a militarist. Be a brain-dead, indoctrinated drone. But don't tell me you're a humanitarian. Don't tell me you're pro-justice. If this same guy that wanted to go shoot up a mosque, if he had enlisted in the military, and yeah, wasn't Australia part of the coalition of the willing? He could have come to the United States and enlisted in the military and got paid to kill Muslims, get decorated to kill Muslims, become a hero, and then get off the plane at airports and have random Americans come up to him and say, thank you for your service. Doing the exact same thing. Remember Mad Dog Mattis? Remember the siege of Fallujah? They did just that. They kicked in the doors and shooting young girls holding babies in their arms and shoot them in the face. U.S. military men under the orders of George Bush. And now George Bush, under his watch, killing over 1 million Muslims. Now he gets to get twerked on by Michelle Obama. And he don't even got to put a dollar in her G-string. He just gives her butterscotch candies and he get a full lap dance. Oh, I just love him. I just hate that hypocrisy. I want to punch this microphone. I just want to lash out. I just hate that hypocrisy. I hate the hypocrisy almost as much as I hate the actual atrocities. After atrocities, I hate the hypocritical sympathy and outcry and support. And then another thing, New Zealanders got more nerve than a toothache. I look at the media, and the New Zealanders are like, this is the worst tragedy in New Zealand's history. And I'm like, wait a minute. When white folks got to New Zealand, there was already a whole culture, a whole civilization right there, the Maori people. And in under a decade, they had reduced their population by 50%, which qualifies as a genocide. There were massacres everywhere. If white people saw a piece of land that they wanted, they wouldn't even warn the people. They just go to kill it. And it came to the point that by the time Europeans had fully settled that island, the natives had to move literally to the highest mountain peaks or to the draggy swamps, because they couldn't live on any of the fertile land. They couldn't live on any places that white people wanted to occupy. And they literally had people just living naked and without shelter in swamps. And millions of people, tens of thousands of people died just from exposure because they weren't able to live in their cities and villages anymore. But I guess when the Europeans were there settling, the settlers, I hate that word settlers too. I don't know why we need to start saying the European invaders. When a white person comes and say, my ancestors were settlers. No, your ancestors were invaders. Y'all got the nerve. We can sit and comfortably, and you got MAGA heads, MAGAloids running around talking about invasion at the southern border. Invader on invader violence. But New Zealand already had, and there are still Maori people there, and they have high rates of suicide, high rates of alcoholism and drug abuse because they are still oppressed, they are still discriminated against, they are still mass incarceration, they are a higher percentage of incarcerated people, and they still are seeing their land be occupied. So, I mean, even if you're a righteous, good white person, be very careful talking about the worst of anything. Trump is the worst president. New Zealand's worst massacre. Oh, America's not living up to. Be very careful about the worst. Now, I ain't saying there aren't things that are worse that could happen, but if you are, and even if you're black, when you're talking about anything in any type of European or European settler colony, America, Australia, Canada, and yes, Latin America. Mexico is a European settler colony. Spanish is not a New World language. It's a Latin language. Latin comes out of Rome. It's white. Panama, Puerto Rico, oh, Chile, Brazil. These are all white nations that are occupied by white people that killed off the settlers, killed off the natives, and brought enslaved Africans there. I don't know why we tend to think that certain countries were just always, or I don't know. Ethnic studies, history, I don't know. But if you are a white person living outside of Europe and something happens in your country, be very careful when you want to say it's the worst. Y'all just got to step your game up. Your ancestors were about that life. So I don't care. Oh, a school shooting. This is the worst mass shooting in American history. Nope. I'm pretty sure the people who hold that crown for being the worst mass shooting, they got to be brown skinned, Native Americans or Africans. What was the body count? Because Rosewood and Tulsa, Oklahoma were mass shooting events. They were not even state sanctioned. Those were vigilante mass shooters. So, I'm just saying, just as a warning, if you don't want to get hashtagged, or if you just are interested in being historically accurate, I don't care what happens from here forward, be very careful when you want to put that stamp of the worst, or to call something un-American. That's another thing you have to be careful about. That's what they're saying in New Zealand. New Zealand, we don't do these kind of things in New Zealand. Yes, you do. Ask any Maori. You notice they're not talking to the Maori people. And all the news coverage of what happened in New Zealand, they're still erasing the people. Every single person they put a camera has been a white New Zealander. What do you think? Oh, I think it's a terrible tragedy. This is not our country. This is not the character of our country. Wait, your country is currently engaged in a genocide against the native people, denying the native people their self-determination. I haven't seen them. I know some of y'all maybe find it and send it to me where they go, the Western media goes and puts a camera in the face of a Maori person. But then, don't even do that because I'm pretty sure they really good at finding Uncle Toms I'm pretty sure there'll be some Maoris there. Oh, this is the worst tragedy. Just like here in America. I'm just saying. Just if you want to be an intelligent person and avoid being a hashtag, you just have to be careful of calling anything the worst in America or anywhere else in the white world, because more likely than not, if you see something that happens really bad, mass shooting, mass massacre, murder, that related to murder or mutilation, I'm pretty sure that in your history, your ancestors then outdone you. Y'all gonna have to work really hard to outdo your ancestors in the mass murder and wanton destruction department. Just saying. But moving on. This stuff is frustrating me. And another thing with Michael Jackson, and then we're gonna get to self-reparations. Black folks are upset and fighting because they don't want Michael Jackson ripped down. They don't want Michael Jackson's catalog to be erased. They don't want Michael Jackson to be persecuted after his death. And then they went and asked Paris Jackson, your daddy in trouble. And she said, it's not my role. It's not my responsibility to defend my father. That's saying a lot. Like, wow, I wish my son would. If I was dead and people started talking, spitting dirt on my name, I wish my son would be like, it's not my role to defend my father after everything I did. For the 9 days I carried you, growing in my testicles, no charge. That ain't me. I charged. I'm not that. We all know that song from that infomercial. I charge. You owe me. But Paris Jackson, I really think, and this is going to be kind of a convoluted thing. Paris Jackson, a white woman, until I need a cheek swab, I need something. I'm not a man of faith. If it talks like a white woman, walks like a white woman, and clucks like a white woman, then it's a white woman. Ain't nothing wrong with being a white woman. There's a whole campaign out here telling white folks it's okay to be white. And she's dating a racist white boy that got Confederate flag tattoos and uses the N-word. I mean, nothing gets you. I mean, those are white credentials if I never seen none. But like, I'm not a purist. If Jackson is her daddy, I still follow the one drop rule. I don't really follow the one drop rule, but the one drop rule, I'm cool with it. I can get with it. Some of y'all are more purists. Y'all think y'all got a higher pedigree than me. I don't really follow human eugenics and pedigree. So if she black, she black. If Michael Jackson is her biological father, then fine, she's black. But I'm not taking Michael Jackson's word for it, because Michael Jackson said on national TV and said he only had one nose job and he never bleached his skin. Now, Michael Jackson is a known liar. He insults my intelligence. And if you got some intelligence, they should be insulted too by some of the claims Michael Jackson made in his life, if you're paying attention. But that's not even the thing. But I think as a white woman, she thinks black people should serve her. She thinks all of y'all out here protect Michael Jackson's legacies. She's like, that's the peasant's job. And when you say project, Michael Jackson's legacy is 3 white kids that's going to get all his money. So you out here fighting, ain't no money coming to you. And if Paris Jackson and Blanket Jackson and, what's the other dude's name? I don't know the other dude's name. Michael Jackson Jr.? Yes, I got it. Michael Jackson Jr. Michael Jr., Blanket Jr., and Paris Jr. If they ain't got you on the payroll, if you don't work for a PR firm or a legal firm, and you on a retainer by the Jackson family, you need to shut the blood clot up about Jackson's residuals. Simply, but now if you want to fight for somebody who got a tainted legacy, go fight for James Brown. We know his kids, and you know, if you fight for James Brown, that money going in black pockets. Barry Gordy. There's some black people with questionable histories that we can fight for, and we at least know the money gonna stay in the hood. Go fight for it. If they come out on some dirt on Prince, Black sisters, Prince's family, you know, the money going to black folks. We speculate. But I'll be damned if I press like on a link, share, hashtag, march, protest, or do any damn thing about the Michael Jackson legacy. Not because Michael Jackson made great music. Again, not my forte. I've never purchased or owned anything Michael Jackson. My Uncle Chris took me to a Michael Jackson show, and I was flabbergasted. I was blown away. They had Michael Jackson floating out on the audience. He was floating around. I never seen anything like it. Shoot, before and after that, I've only been to hip-hop concert. And not only do they not fly over the audience, they don't even have choreographed dances. They just cuss at you on stage and grab their junk. We all been to rap shows. Unless it's MC Hammer. He tried to bring, choreography, and y'all see what y'all did to Hammer. He's a joke. At least to y'all. I thought Hammer was amazing. Never seen him live, but I've seen the videos. Like, go Hammer, go. Cole, go MC Hammer. But I'm not fighting to get no money in Paris Jackson's pocket. She won't even speak up to her for her own damn father. Y'all look like some damn fools. And then here's another thing about justice. Another thing, I'm about to punch this microphone. Before you go fight for justice for Michael Jackson, we got a whole laundry list of black revolutionaries, black political prisoners, black people in exile, black people who are true victims of the system. Michael Jackson should be, if on our priority list at all, should be way low. We want to talk about exonerating people, wrongly convicted people, talking about exposing the lies told about people. We got way too many true freedom fighters. We got way too many black revolutionaries who died in poverty, who died in obscurity. We got volumes of books, libraries full of books that are going out of publication. So if you guys want to go and dig up an ancestor, resurrect an ancestor, preserve the legacy of the ancestor, start with Professor William Mackey. There he has journals and all this unpublished materials. When he died, he was trying to build a library. Go and build that goddamn library for Professor William Mackey. Dale Jones. Contact Sister Correndon. People are trying to keep his books under publication and keep his material and his research and his journalism alive. I swear to God, don't come to me with no Michael Jackson's legacy. I spit on Michael Jackson's legacy. But that's me. We got way too many black people who are really down with us. Who didn't just use their talents, didn't just use their capacity to go build a Neverland and play Peter Pan with little white kids. And like Dr. John Henry said, and Nellie Fuller said, you have a right to go over there. If you want to create and mutilate your features into become a white person and lay claim to white offspring and surround yourself with Elvis Presley's daughter and go live off some fantasy, because Michael Jackson was only black when he got in trouble. He gave millions of dollars to the Jehovah's Witness. But then when he got in trouble, I didn't see no Jehovah's Witnesses. I didn't see the Watchtower stand with him. I saw the Nation of Islam. I saw Jesse and Al Sharpton, even Dick Gregory. When Michael Jackson was on trial, Dick Gregory said, I'm going to fast. And I'm not fasting that he's found innocent. I'm not fasting that he's found guilty. I'm going to fast that the truth come out. So all these black folks rally around Michael Jackson. As soon as he gets off, he puts on his little feather cap and flies off to Netherlands, and ain't half a black person. He won't even let black people mop the floors at Neverland. He goes off to the Ukraine, goes off to Bosnian orphanages. He put money and support and validity. Everything he did was white. So let white people, they have him. He's theirs. He voluntarily said, look, even though black people have always been like, yeah, Michael, we with you. We got your back. He never had our back. I ain't for one-sided relationships. You know, When it comes to race, I'm like Beyonce, to the left, to the left. You're unreplaceable. I kick you to the curb. When it comes to racial loyalties, I have a very small, very, very easily achievable racial unity requirement. It don't take much to have Bro Diallo be like, yeah, right on. I still have remnants of pro-blackness. You ain't got to, all you got to do is carry yourself. All you got to do is carry yourself to a minimum standards of respect and solidarity to black people. You ain't even got to be revolutionary. You ain't even got to be conscious. But at the very least, if you are, because I know ain't no black person exempt. Y'all saw that video of Russell Simmons' daughter. This is a girl who was born to a father who's hundreds of millions of dollars, got all that money, all that status, all that prestige. A girl who's never going to have to work a day in her life. And she's at one of the most elite private schools. And every day she goes to school, they're calling her nigger and a thug and a crackhead. And so she goes to social media. I'm telling this guy to stop calling me a crackhead, stop calling me a nigger. I want him to stop, and he just won't stop. All that money. So I know, even if you're a rich black person, I know there ain't none of us exempt. Ain't no hierarchy amongst slaves. All hierarchies, all separations between black people are arbitrary as hell, and our oppressors can snap it in a blink of an eye. You could be the king of pop, and the next thing, the king of pedophilia. So I understand. So my thing is, you got to bring something to get some. I ain't for no one-sided solidarity. And there's no such thing as one-sided solidarity. If you showing love to a black person that don't show love to black people, that's servitude, not solidarity. And every time, if y'all are successful in preserving Michael Jackson's legacy, all y'all doing is putting money in 3 white people's pockets that ain't got no love and have shown no real connection to the black community. They are more distant from the black community than their own father. Whether you think Michael Jackson is innocent or guilty. I personally think Michael Jackson is guilty. Again, if it quacks like a pedophile and walks like and all that, then it's a pedophile. He gave off strong pedophile vibes. And like I said, I ain't saying this because of the courts. Because some of y'all, same people that be like, F the police, free Mumia, turn around and be like, Michael Jackson was exonerated. He was found not guilty. So y'all love to rest on the court's decisions when the court's decisions align with your own. And like I said, I'm with John Henry Clark. John Henry Clark said, Grandma's kitchen table is our Supreme Court. That's our judiciary, that's our legislature, and that's where we know. What we understand. We do our own investigation, our own interpretations, and draw our own conclusion independent of what our oppressors say or conclude. So they can tell us this person is exonerated. They're innocent, and the black community should say independently, like, well, y'all can say what you want. We reject him. And then they can say this person is a cop killer, Mumia. We're going to put him on death row. And we'd be like, nah, free Mumia. We got our own judicial system. And then we can at least have that in our own heads. And then as we get it in our heads, maybe we can start to build the institutions to enforce our laws and protect ourselves from the injustice system of our oppression. And that requires a little work. But I continue to digress. Let's move on. I'm spending way too much time on this stuff. Time is an illusion. I'm going to have to get more esoterics up in here. Numerologists, spiritualists, vibrational frequency type people. People that wear crystals and copper. I'm not making fun of y'all. Y'all do that good enough on your own. Y'all don't need me to do that. I'm just saying. It's a good escape. But time is an illusion. Because a lot of times people get on me about not getting to the point, about not managing the time, the limited time I have on the air here. Y'all get on me about it. And I'd like to just be able to blow people off. You ever try to have a debate with a spiritual person? A person whose chakras are aligned, who's at a high vibrational frequency, who's in tune with the universe. You ever try to have a debate with a person like that? You can't win. You can't make it. You can't get out of the game. So when people come to tell me, like, brother, you said the show, you supposed to be talking about self-reparations, and I spent all day talking about Paris Jackson with her old ugly self, then I could be like, brother, the problem is not me. The problem is not that I am not sticking to my notes, and the problem is with you, brother. Because if you understood where you existed in space and time in interdimensional strings, then you would understand that by not talking about the topic, I have fully covered the topic. I levitate above and beyond an advance of the topic. I wish I could do that and really like sell that. That'd be dope. But then again, if I was on here talking that mess, y'all make me a billionaire like y'all made Oprah. You know. Y'all make, or I could go demagogue. Y'all make me a billion. Speaking of billionaire like Oprah, please support the Bro Diallo Show. Support Q4 Radio. You can support me. You can just share the show. Hashtag shit, Bro Diallo. Subscribe to the YouTube. Kick in on the website. What you got? You know. I'm like Bernie. No contribution is too small. You know. Because the show is here. I enjoy doing the show. I think the show is an asset to the community. I think it makes a positive contribution to the just aspirations of our people, which is my yardstick for whether or not an activity is justified or not. But, you know, it takes some fiat. Just kick in if you can. Share, subscribe, all of that. Now, let's talk about self-reparations. I talked about pain in full and the reality of reparations. The potential of reparations to solve many persistent issues in the black community, the potential of reparations to leave us stagnant, or the potential of reparations even has to degrade our condition. And I talked about how myself, who I've always tried to have a critical assessment or critique of reparations. I talked about how if you have anything other than I fully support reparations, if you have anything beyond that to say, then people start to accuse you of not supporting reparations. It's kind of like you're in a relationship with somebody and you can't criticize them. You're in a relationship with somebody that you do love, that you do think is worthy, that you do want to keep the company up, but they have hygiene issues, they have money management issues, they have anger issues, and the moment you speak to any of their issues, they say, oh, you don't love me. Well, you don't support me. I love reparations. I support reparations. I say reparations are absolutely owed to African people. But there are some issues. And since like the Cadillac, the Rolls Royce, the Porsche of reparations is Jewish reparations paid out by Germany after World War II. You would go talk, if you have more than a 5-minute conversation about reparations, pro or anti, somebody's going to mention the Jews got their reparations, which is true. And of all the black people who support reparations, they don't really study reparations. It's a feeling. They feel. Now, let me not lie. There are a lot of black people who have done the research in terms of they've looked up multinational corporations. They looked up the insurance agencies, the shipping companies, the various families and familial dynasties, the real estate owners. They've looked at the international, absentee landlords. There's been a lot of research in terms of tracking down the money. Where did the funds, the wealth of that are there trillions of dollars in wealth that Africans generated at our time of chattel bondage? But in terms of the cultural, so that's the economic, but the cultural, the political, the social, and psychological elements of reparations, I don't see very much research done on that. And I can see why. I mean, there was a Jewish guy who looked at reparations for Jewish people, who did a critical analysis of not just the economics, but the social, political, cultural, etc., national. And he was essentially called a self-hating Jew and one of the most hated men by his own people. He's ostracized. So I played some of Norman Finkelstein talking about it. And I said I do this because not only do I think black people are worthy of reparations, I do think that black people will eventually secure reparations. So in anticipation for that, and you ever see the lottery, and you look at lottery winners, and how a lot of lottery winners say the lottery has ruined my life. And we also know about all the trillions of dollars black people have put in the collection plate by the ministers and how that gets squandered. So we can't ignore the potential for misappropriation of reparations funds, of corruption, theft of reparations funds. But whenever I try to bring this up, and I talk to NCOBRA members, I talk to the NBUF, National Black United Front, and people in the National Black United Front. I've talked to various people over the years within the reparations movement, and when I start to bring up these issues, they're like, they really are afraid that if anything, if you believe or discuss anything negative in relationship to reparations, that will somehow delegitimize our worthiness or our attempt to secure reparations. But anyway, I'm not going to rehash Friday's show. Go listen to it. Find it on YouTube. Subscribe to YouTube. You can find it very soon. It'll be uploaded, and you can download the podcast. Will be uploaded to diallokenyatta.com. You can upload it and burn it to a CD and hustle it out of the trunk of your car. People still hustle CDs? Yeah, they do actually. People come to me on the street like, yo, I want you to listen to my CD. And I'm like, yo, I don't want to listen to your CD. That's what I'm going to do. You know what I'm going to do? And feel free to take this idea. I'm going to burn CDs of my show. And if somebody approach me about listening to their mixtape, I'm going to ask them to listen to my show. That way we can trade. I'm just burnt. I've been burnt. I've been hurt too many times where I bought CDs off the street and it's the absolute trash. But I digress. What I would like for people to do, give me a card and say, listen, this is my SoundCloud, this is my thing. And I can go listen to your SoundCloud and I'm like, I like this. I'm going to see if I can put some money in this dude's pocket. But anyway, like I said, I'm sleep deprived. I don't know if that justifies what's going on here today. I'm sorry. I'm going to spend... Let's talk about self-reparations. One of the things that when I was working with National Black United Front that was aligned with NCOBRA, is I talked about self-reparations, saying that we don't and shouldn't wait on white folks. You know, y'all think white folks is God. They may not come when we want them, but they're always right on time. Because if you're fighting and you have a movement for reparations, there's a couple of things that are rooted in the movement for reparations. One of the things is you acknowledge that there are deficits. Two things that you must, if you're pro reparations, there's two things we all must agree on. Whether you're the sick, backwards ADOS or the Pan-Africanists who started the reparations movement, who are the true founders of the reparations movement and who have been in the reparations movement long before Yvette even shaved off her dusty locks. You have to acknowledge two things. I don't care where you stand on this reparation things. Number one, there are ongoing deficits in the black community. Number two, there are profound injustices that affect all black people. And based on those two things, the injustices that lead to the deficits, whether you get reparations or not, those two things exist, and you have to acknowledge that those two things exist. And so you must say, I want accounting for the injustices, and I want to fill the deficits. One way to get accounting for an injustice and fulfilling deficits is by the people who have committed the injustice against you to give the resources to fill the deficits, and then to cease and desist cease and desist from committing the atrocities that led to the deficits. That's what the reparations movement is supposed to be about. But a lot of times, those people who had committed the atrocities are in transit. They refuse to acknowledge what they did wrong. And if they won't acknowledge what they did wrong, then they will not take steps to correct what they did wrong. Now, most white people don't deny that there was slavery. But most white people deny that conditions of black people today are related to slavery. And even when they tell you that, many of them are lying. They think black people do drugs, black people don't have family values, black people don't value education, black people have children they can't afford, black people commit black on black crime. And they have all these stereotypes and illusions and myths about black people that explain black people's condition today. And they even have pet Negroes. Like, what's that girl's? Candace Owens, who sit here and who is sitting in front of white people and say, no black people alive today have ever been slaves. No black people alive have ever been slaves. Now, you will find Candace Owens will not sit in front of a bunch of Jewish people and say, not one Jewish person in this room has ever been in a concentration camp. Now, the one black person here, most of y'all were born long after the Nazis were defeated and out of power. She would never say that. But she can sit in front of black folks. Just like Kanye. Kanye can say, well, the Jews have been persecuted since the Roman Empire. They were throwing Jews to lions. You've been persecuted for 4,000 years? That sounds like a choice. He would never do that for some reason. But when it comes to black people, people feel they can say, even they hire Uncle Tom, sell out Sambo, Mistral, Handkerchief Ed, sell out race traders. They can find a Negro that will go out and articulate their views for them. That's a smart thing. I got to give, you got to give your enemy props where props are due. I do the same thing. I'm not even going to lie. I go and find white people that say things that I agree with, that are in contradiction to what the views of the masses of white people, and I promote that particular white person. I just played Norman Finkelstein. Most Jews don't like him. Most white people don't like him. The few white people that even know who he is. I play him. So they go get Candace Owens. I smack them in the head with Norman Finkelstein. So, it's just like they trying to hit us over the head with Uncle Tom's. I'm going to hit them over the head with radical, anarchist white folks. So I don't blame them. They're more effective at doing that than we are. But most white people feel that black people today, it's a losing. Even we've now found that back in 2005, the Democratic Party, the DLC, the Democratic Leadership Committee, made it the official Democratic policy to tell anybody running on the Democratic ticket to oppose reparations. And the reason they said oppose reparation is it's politics. They felt that it would alienate the white majority. And so they felt that if they advocated for reparations, it would cause them to lose elections. It was a losing issue. And I know y'all are offended by it, but it's not untrue. It is a losing issue with the white majority because most white people don't feel that we are worthy of or deserving of reparations. So understanding that in 19, since 1868, there have been advocacy, there have been legislation, there have been policies, there have been movements for reparations for well over 100 years, but reparations have not been paid out. And if you ask the average white person in America, they believe that black people have already gotten more from the government than we deserve in the form of welfare, set-asides, handouts, and quotas. So not only do they think they don't owe us reparations, they think black people owe a debt to America. I kid you not. So understanding that, understanding that there is a deficit, there is a unaddressed historical injustice, and understanding that the people who owe us reparations not only deny the fact that they owe us, that they have gone so far to project on us and believe that most Americans, black people, owe a debt to America. And that the most basic form of debt that we owe to America is that we should be proud to be Americans. We should be grateful to be Americans, because if they hadn't enslaved us, we'd be in Africa living in huts or starving. That's the average white. So understanding all of that, what are black people to do? Continue to beg, continue to lobby, continue to appeal, continue to vote. I say, yeah, okay, all of that, yes. But there's another thing we can do. And this is what I call self-reparations. Because we cannot wait for America to figure out how to do right by us. We have to address these historical atrocities. And you understand, not only historical atrocities, we are under ongoing oppression, under ongoing campaigns of genocide. And we have these deficits. So I have a program for self-reparations. I think that understanding that you are a member of an oppressed race, you have to take the position that I do not have the privilege of freedom, because I'm not free. So my freedoms are an illusion. And most freedoms that black people exercise, that they identify as freedoms, I'm free. I can do what I want. I can buy where I want. I can marry who I want. I can live where I want. I can do what I want. These freedoms, more often than not, further entrench us in oppression, which is a contradiction. Exercising freedoms leads to oppression. Exercising freedom, and it's not me. I'm not talking for me. Because I have incidents where people are stealing my intellectual property, which you can't really steal my intellectual property. I'm not a capitalist. I don't, this is intellectual commons. So I have no problem with people taking my show and sharing it, reproducing it, and putting it out there. That's not the theft. But there are people taking my stuff without even attributing it to me. Literally taking the words out of my mouth and writing it and putting their name on it. Now, I have a problem with that. Not because you deny me anything, but it's just that. So I don't do that. It was Amos Wilson who pointed out that the exercise for most black people, when they exercise their freedom and free will, the exercise of their freedom just so happens to enrich our oppressors and lead to entrenching our deficits. So when you're truly exercising your freedom, you're not really exercising your freedom, you're acting out your indoctrination. You're acting out a script that you never even had an opportunity to read. Or as Bobby Wright said, in one respect, black people are the freest people in America. And we are free in the fact that we can act against the interests of our people without any type of sanctions. Again, we go back to Norman Finkelstein, who is an accomplished scholar. And he said something that even though it was right, it is academically, morally, historically accurate, it is against the defined interest of his people, so he has been greatly sanctioned. His career has suffered. He has been spied on. But black people can come out, a black person can come out and say, it's hard not to kill niggas. It's a full-time job not to kill niggas at a time that niggas is getting killed all over America without consequences. And this person can be looked at as an icon, as a hero, even as a black leader or a black savior who's helping black people. So you can do anything against the interest of black people without impunity. That is the freedom we have to violate we don't have freedom to go against our oppressors, but we have freedom to go against ourselves. And Amos Wilson said it is not an accident that when an average black person wants to exercise or express their freedom, it's more often than not engaged in such a way that is subversive to the collective interest. Your personal freedom, exercising your personal freedom, is more often than not subversive to our collective interest. The video just came out with Meek Mill, some, B-list comedian. I think Dave Chappelle was there and some other rappers. And they were talking about how they don't owe nobody nothing. And some guy said, this lady, she encouraged me when I was coming up in my career. And she said, yeah, you're going to make it. And now you think I should buy you a Porsche or a condo? And Meek Mill said, I'm going to be real with it. I don't owe nobody nothing. And they just, Philly, I just saw a couple of, year before last, black folks marching in the streets of Philly, free Meek Mill. Meek Mill would be under the jail right now if it was not for the collective movement of the people. And not even the current collective movement of the people, but the historical struggles of our people. We all owe a debt. I've never met Fred Hampton, but I owe a debt to Fred Hampton. I owe a debt to Malcolm X. I owe a debt to Marcus Garvey. I owe a debt to Ida B. Wells. And since I cannot pay those people personally, the way I pay my debt to my ancestors is by paving a way for my descendants. And we got black people who mock that. These African philosophies. We all know Aristotle, Plato, Socrates. But we owe a debt. Not just the debt that, when we're so keen, you can't talk about the debt white people owe us, and you're not even focusing on the debt black people owe themselves. So there are some specific programs that I really can't get into because I am out of time. So I'm going to have to do a part 3 to this. I do apologize, but I promise you this. I'm going to get some rest tonight. I'm going to go to the gym and work out. I think I got a few errands to run, but I'm going to prioritize some rest. And then tomorrow we got the NFL. We finally have a new, I hope, permanent home at Frontline Bookstores. We'll be at Frontline in Hyde Park having our weekly book discussion on the final chapters of Class Struggle in Africa. So please come out. And if you can't come out to see the thing, I believe is China Fox broadcast on her YouTube. You can get the book discussion for Class Struggle in Africa. So there's that. And Wednesday, I'm going to start out with, I'm not going to say nothing. I'm going to give you my specific list of self-reparation protocols that can repair, that can restore African people. Because reparations, according to white folks' laws, since y'all fighting for white folks' money, you're going to have to do it according to white folks' laws, that the goal of reparations is to restore a people to the status that they were in prior to the atrocities. That's reparations. So, reparations is not making you equal with your oppressor. Reparations is not giving you the economic capacity to enjoy the fruit of your oppressor's society. Reparations is to restore us to what were we before we were. If you want reparations for slavery, first thing you have to say, what was our status and standing prior to slavery? We weren't equal to white people prior to slavery. We weren't Americans prior to slavery. We weren't living our lives and dying to amass white people's fiat before slavery. We were independent, sovereign, unified people. We were African people. So reparations has to restore, if you want real reparations. Now, most people that cry for reparations aren't really fighting for reparations. What they want is a payout, which is different than reparations. But I mean, reparations is a little bit more complex. And I wish these people who just want a payout, who want to come up, would stop using reparations. Stop bastardizing, co-opting, and disgracing the struggle for reparations. But like I said, there has been, it's not unorganized. And yes, of course, I'm talking about the ADOS movement. There has been pushback. There are people setting the record straight. There are people exposing the lies and corruption. But anyway, this is Bro Diallo Show, Q4 Radio. You can find archives of the Bro Diallo Show at diallokenyatta.com. You can find the shows archived all the way to my first show and also get a lot of swag and goodies. Everybody, holler at your boy. Let me know you got your packages, your appreciation items, your guerrilla media, your pins. You can become a Patreon and you can become a part of that. And they should be there by now. So if you haven't gotten your appreciation items that was sent over a week ago, except, I guess if one brother and I had to send it to Switzerland or the UK. I don't know if yours is there yet. But if you live within the occupied territories of the empire of the United States, you should have your items by now. If you don't have your items, go to Patreon or shoot me a message or a text or whatever and let me know, and I can figure out, or I can send you your tracking number or whatever to make sure we can find out. But I think everybody's been made whole, and for all my new Patreons, I'll be sending out the first of every month. I send out the appreciation items at the beginning of the month. So, and I'm gonna stay on top of that. But anyway, you can become a subscriber to my YouTube, or you can become a Patreon to get updates and archives and get the full show. Because again, also on YouTube, you don't get the full show. You get a large segment of it. So anyway, not yet. Leslie, you didn't get yours yet? Okay. Let me check. I'm gonna check that when I get back to my office. I'm gonna check that. But anyway, Bro Diallo Show, Q4 Radio, AM 1680. And also, finally, Patreons, make sure you put the most accurate address. Because what I do when you put your address on the Patreon site to get your appreciation item, I copy and paste your address. So, at one time, like I think I said before, I was working in Bonner Springs, Kansas. And I was working on this farmland. We had this little organic farm. And the land was owned by the Moorish Science Temple. And they made up their own names because, they believed that they were science. Moorish science, they believed they were sovereign. So they invented their own names. Like they called this street Moorish Lane and all these weird names for these streets. And when I would try to have items sent to and fro, they wouldn't go there. Like literally black people, and I'm with black people, name yourself, make up your own name. I ain't sweating you. But sometimes when it comes to postage, don't put on there Africa Divinity Lane if you live on Clark Street. Put Clark Street, so that, because I just copy and paste the address. And so whatever address you gave me is the address I mailed it to. So wherever your package end up. But if there was some type of issue or discrepancy, I will repackage and send you something new if you didn't get the item. But you just let me know you didn't get it, and I'll get the address, confirm the address, and send it right back out. Leslie, I'll holler at you when I get back to my office and get that package right back out, because I want to take care of the people who are taking care of me, because it wouldn't be no Bro Diallo show without the Bro Diallo Patreon. So, I work for y'all. I work for the people, but I work directly for y'all, but I work for the people too. Anyway, Q4 Radio, AM 1680, Chicago, Illinois, 8:55. I'll see y'all Wednesday. We're going to start off, walk right into self-reparations specific. I'm going to come up with 5 to 10 specific things we can do for self-reparations. Peace, Bro Diallo Show.